Before we get into today's video, I would like to say if you're someone who's interested in retro modded consoles like Game Boy Advances, Game Boy SPs, or Colors, we have them all at privateclubcollective.com. You can even find unique t-shirts like these ones here. We have over 30 of them on our website, and you can get one for yourself or for a loved one. So without further ado, let's head into the story. What if I told you that the real-life horrors that motivated our favorite Netflix show, Squid Games, was inspired by a real-life place where people were kidnapped, tortured, and abused, and forced into manual labor? You would say this likely wouldn't have happened because it sounds like a concentration camp, and those were not seen after World War II. I would tell you that you are wrong. So let me go ahead and fill you guys in and set the stage for what's to come. In the 1970s, between 1980s, there was a state-sponsored facility called Brothers Home. This place was marketed as a rehabilitation center, not a concentration camp or even a labor camp, simply a place where vagrants, homeless people, people with disabilities, or even orphans could go and find rehabilitation, of course. But it's much darker than it sounds, because a lot of these people, over nearly 40,000 people, were kidnapped, tortured, and abused in these forced labor camps. A lot of these prisoners had endured terrible abuse from the lines of psychological, SA, and physical, as in beatings. So you might ask, what were they doing in these camps? What kind of work were they being forced to do? Well, most of it was making clothing and bricks. You might say, well, they might be doing it for themselves, or because they're homeless, they maybe not have any clothes, or maybe they could make bricks for a home. I don't know, but they definitely were not. These people were being forced to make these goods and services for other people to profit from. They never saw a dime. Even worse, a lot of people had died in this camp, and their death was essentially covered up. The reported death toll, which is likely much more, was 500 people, but there's documentation proving there was mass graves for these people. Now, 500 people is a lot of people, but mass graves? That's a big word that sounds like it could definitely fill more than 500 people. And unfortunately, that was likely the case. You might ask yourself, how could atrocities like this exist? Post-World War II, of course, when we had seen the effects of the Holocaust and concentration camps. Well, the South Korean government saw this as a way to fund the homeless problem, or abolish the homeless problem, especially with the 1988 Olympics coming into town. That was a huge driving force to instill this rehabilitation center, as well as to continue or promote their urbanization and their rapid economic growth. And you might even ask yourself, well, there has to have been people who went to authorities or political figures and were giving complaints, or essentially were whistleblowers. There were those, but of course, the authorities had turned a blind eye because of bribes and the political connections that they had. So a lot of these people just were essentially swept under the rug. Now, a very scary fact I had noticed with the death toll is that a lot of these bodies were cremated and thrown in unmarked graves, as well as bodies being sold to hospitals. Not only were these people working forcefully to create goods that were being sold by other people to profit from, but the bodies themselves that they left behind in this world were sold. That is very gruesome to think. Now, furthermore, you might say, well, the people leading this facility likely thought that the staff members were just forcefully making these people work, not maybe beating them and committing SA. Well, that is definitely wrong, because it's documented that the director of this facility has acclaimed, of course, this is just what people can account for, but he has apparently claimed 50 bodies, or killed 50 people with oak wood clubs that he would keep in his office. An 8-year-old that had entered the facility, when he recounted what the abuse was like, he said not only was it from the staff members, but also from the prisoners themselves. When the lights shut off in the bunkers, when they were sleeping, that's when a lot of the SA had continued. So not only was abuse suffered through the day, through their work, but as well as through the night. Stepping away from the gruesome details of abuse, let's get into maybe how this facility was shut down. In the late 1980s, there was a reporter and a few whistleblowers that had gone to the media and exposed the truth to the public. And needless to say, people were infuriated because it proved that they couldn't trust their own government to help their own citizens. And nonetheless, of course, The people who were running these facilities had escaped serious punishment because they were being funded by their own government and told to do so by their own government. And so, of course, strings were pulled to keep these people safe, and that did not sit right with the public of South Korea. So what message does Brothers Home send to us as civilians about government? Well, it shows systemic exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Similar to Squid Games, detainees in Brothers Home were limited to a number, not a name, and they were also treated worse than animals. And it really shows the dehumanization of people for simple profits. And I think this is something that we should not ever forget, because it's something that could always come up again in just different forms, as we had seen, of course, in Squid Games. Alright, it's definitely dark outside. I know I've been yapping for quite a while. I think this story really just serves as an example to ask, at what cost are we willing to be compliant to solve a problem? And with that compliance, how do we know that problem is being solved in a righteous way? If you like content like this, be sure to like and subscribe, and comment what other stories you would like to see videos on. Until next time, thank you for watching.